Let's begin. Okay, so again, Hashem created us for one purpose, for us to grow, accomplish, to gain our world to come. We're put into this world to be given the opportunity to be challenged, to give us the opportunity to grow, to accomplish, to become what we are for eternity. But the purpose for creation is the world to come. This is the prosder, this is the corridor. Okay. Now, one of the points that the Derech Hashem makes in Chelik Beis, Perik Beis, which is what we're up to, is that free will is a very dangerous entity. Because when you give man free will, but it means literally free will, he could just as easily go this way, just as easily go that way, he might just go the wrong way. And it has happened historically. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to realize that many, many people have gone the wrong way. But here's the problem. The problem is that if you go south, you don't belong in the mechitza of Hashem. Meaning, let's say a person went the wrong way. They don't belong in the world to come because they're not roy, they're not fit. Hashem is kulo, good, everything is good. And if you're imperfect, if you're a damaged entity, especially if you fall into the category of ra, of bad, you don't belong there, and you're excluded from that mechitza. Now, that isn't so much a problem because basically there's what we call a kibbutz, a gathering, meaning all of the people who are worthy of being in the world to come will continue to exist, will continue to live. All those people who are not worthy will not. Now, before we get into anything, I want to focus on something that's often misunderstood. There are three distinct Yom Hadin, three distinct judgments. There's Rosh Hashanah, there's when you die, and then there's Tchias HaMesim, each for a different purpose. Every Rosh Hashanah would judge that has nothing to do with the world to come. That's strictly this world. Every Rosh Hashanah we sit in judgment, and Hashem determines my coming year. How much parnasa I'll have, how much health, how much well-being. The events of my year vis-a-vis this world are all determined. Now, largely it's based on who I am. If I've done what I'm supposed to do, then Hashem wants to help me do more. If I've gone off track, then Hashem will judge me in a way to help me get back on track, and I might have to go through different things. But that judgment is strictly to do with our station in the coming year in this world. Okay, that's judgment number one. Judgment number two is when I leave this earth. My body's put in the ground, and I stand in front of Hashem, and then I'm judged for everything that I've done, on the good and the bad. I then go to Olam Neshamos. I spend a certain amount of time there, and then when we're finished, the world is destroyed, Hashem rebuilds it, there's Tchias HaMesim, and right before Tchias HaMesim, there's a third judgment. That judgment is the time when it's determined who will remain and who will no longer be part of this existence. Now, it's very hard to imagine what that moment is like, but I'll give you an illustration that people don't really think about that much, but that is, life only becomes precious when you realize that it might not be there anymore. Find a person who's kind of depressed and kind of down, and he falls overboard and he's drowning in the ocean. Suddenly there's a tremendous urge, an incredible desire to live, because at that moment, life is incredibly precious. Right now, what does it mean to be in the mechitza of Hashem, to be close to Hashem? We don't know, but when that happens, right before Tchias HaMesim, and there's a judgment, there's an incredible clarity of vision that every human being sees. They get it, they experience Hashem, they see Hashem right there, and there's an incredible passion, a desire to be close to Hashem, and almost electromagnetic pull. And at that moment, every human being is judged. Those who are worthy to remain for the Tchias HaMesim remain alive, and the worst punishment is those who are not worthy to remain are annihilated, destroyed, no longer. And that is the ultimate punishment for Rishonim, that they're totally destroyed. Okay, now so far everything is good and everything is easy. The Rishonim are destroyed, the Tzaddikim live on, and everything is good. But here's the problem. The problem is, what if you have someone who did a lot of good, but also did bad? What do you do with him? Meaning, okay, he went through Rosh Hashanah, he died, and he did a lot of good stuff, but also bad stuff. What happens to him? And additionally, what about a Russia? What do you do with a Russia who did a lot of bad, but he also did good? So Hashem judges with extreme mishpat, with extreme justice, And therefore Hashem pays back both in the following way. You see, again, you can't be imperfect and be in the world to come, or at least in Tchias Hamazon, because Hashem is perfect and you don't belong there. So an imperfect person can't be there. Now here's the problem. The problem is with all candor, not a lot of us are perfect. And so what does that mean? Where am I going to be? So hopefully I'm going to make it. Let me first tell you the good news. Ladies, ready for the good news? Kol Yisrael Yesh Lam Chelek Olam Haba. As long as you're in the category, you keep Shabbos, Kashrus, Taharas Mishpacha, you keep within the basic category of an Orthodox Jew, you have a portion of the world to come. But again, here's the problem. The problem is, most likely, you've done a lot of good, and you've also done some things that are not so good. What happens to us, and what happens to the Rishonim? So Derech Hashem explains that the first layer of correction is in this world. What happens is if a person did a lot of good, but also did bad, they're not worthy. In that state, they can't be in Hashem's mechitza. They don't belong in the world to come. So Hashem will pay them back in this world punishments. They'll have to go through pain, turmoil, stress, disease, illness. They'll have to go through stuff in this world, and that pays back what they've done wrong, so that when they leave this world, they can go to their Olam Haba. And the opposite is true for a Russia. Let's say a person was very wicked, he did a lot of things wrong, but he also did things that were good. Hashem will pay him back in this world by giving him great success. He'll have tremendous financial success, maybe he'll have a great marriage, great kids, he'll have a lot of easy, good things in this world. So the first layer of paying back mishpat, paying back what a person, doesn't fit into the totality, is in this world. So again, you judge basically on rove. If you rove good, you belong in the world to come, but you have to go through bad in this world. It pays back and cleans it up. If you rove bad, you're going to be destroyed, so you pay back in this world. Okay, that's layer one. So far, so good? Okay. Now here's the problem. The problem is often it's not enough. Meaning, let's say a person did a lot of chesed and they gave tzedakah, but they also regularly spoke Lashon Hara. Regularly. Meaning not regularly, but regularly. Like, think about it, send over the WhatsApps that you shouldn't send over, say things you shouldn't say, and there's a lot of damage. So what happens is that there's not enough pain in this world to pay that person back without totally crippling them or destroying them. And therefore Hashem introduced another level of things. And that level is something called Gahannam. Now, anybody Sephardi around here? Good. Because you're not allowed to mention the word Sephard to Gahannam to Sephardim, because they're real Yorei Shamayim. And if you mention the word Gahannam, they get all scared. Ladies, I got some bad news for you. Ready? Most likely we're all going to spend some time in Gahannam. But let's understand what Gahannam is, and let's understand its purpose. Gahannam is a special chesed that Hashem created to allow us to cleanse out those areas that can't be cleansed in this world. So again, let's imagine I did lots of good things, but also did lots of bad things. So the first layer of correction, the first layer of mishpat, is I'm paid back in this world with pain, trouble, turmoil, all kinds of stuff. But if that's not enough, which most of the time it isn't, then I require Yisurei Nafshi, spiritual punishments, and that's where Gahannam comes into the picture. And it seems that most of us are going to spend some time in Gahannam. Now, what is Gahannam? Fiery furnace, burning.
Being exposed to
embarrassment.
Being exposed to our imperfections.
Right. It's strictly spiritual. It's not physical. My body's in the ground. I'm no guy with a pitchfork, and no Hades with a flames.
Seeing what we damaged ourselves.
Right. It's that moment with absolute clarity, recognize Hashem created me, held me in existence. Hashem gave me every mitzvah for my benefit, and for no good reason I did stupid things that were damaging right in front of Hashem.
But
and
tshuva. If we did
Yeah.
tshuva, do we still have
No.
to suffer?
Tshuva works. No, tshuva is great. Tshuva is the panacea. If you did tshuva and really did tshuva, then it's cleaned up, it's gone. But the problem is, did you do tshuva for everything? You see,
Well, if you do teshuva every day, you should be saved.
yes. But what does tshuva mean? Guess what? the Orach HaTzaddikim explains that tshuva has many levels to it. He says, imagine I have a beautiful white coat, and the bus comes and splashes mud on my coat. So if I rub it, I get some of the mud off. I rub it some more, I get some more, but there's still a stain. I take some solution, I rub it in it. If you rub and rub and rub, eventually everything's gone. But it takes an awful lot of cleansing to get rid of it. He explains that's how tshuva works. Tshuva has many levels to it. If you say the words, just saying those words takes off a little bit, but it's the real regret. It's the real charata, the real, that process of real tshuva definitely works. But again, it requires the process and it requires, yeah.
If a person's about tshuva and wasn't aware of all the things they were doing wrong when they were young, do they have to sit and go through their childhood and until they became from and do tshuva for every action?
Most likely not. Most likely, the concept of tinuk shenishba applies. In other words, meaning, if you see, there's what we call about tshuva today usually starts as a tinuk shenishba. Tinuk shenishba means, in the good old days, the only way someone was brought up not from was if a baby was stolen from the parents. Tinuk shenishba means a infant who was stolen from the parents and brought up in the monastery or brought up whatever by the Cossacks, whatever it may be. And later on, they discovered that they're Jewish and they did tshuva, so they're not responsible for that which they didn't know. They had no education, no knowledge. So tinuk shenishba is considered not responsible for what they did. So basically, Bali tshuva are in good place. Now, the
what extent, like if you have, no one knows, but like living in America, everyone knows Passover exists. Everyone knows it doesn't matter Sheretz Matzah. So if you don't hold that Passover, you know that you're Jewish, you know it's Passover, and you dafka don't do it. Are you still considered that?
So I don't know. It's very hard to know because it depends on your understanding. If you believe that Passover is just this ancient ritual that has no meaning, and that's what you always taught, maybe you're tinuk shenish. But these, to be honest with you, it's really to machlokas in the poskim between the Chazon Ish and Rav Moshe. At what point does a person lose that status of tinuk shenishba? Once they had some exposure to Judaism, once they had some exposure to Torah, at what point do they lose that status? But there's no question, if a person was brought up in Wyoming and had no connection whatsoever to Judaism, and then at 18 or 20 or 22 they went to an Or Sameach, Shabbaton or a gateway, and they started learning and growing, that what they did before they're not responsible for because they were tinuk shenish, but once they saw the light, they turned it. So, so it's good news and bad news. In other words, what a person did before they did tshuva probably isn't a problem. The problem is what we do after we did tshuva. Because to be honest with you, you see, this is the great realization that most of us don't get. And that is we were given such capacity and such incredible opportunities that it's almost invariable that we're going to mess up. In other words, the greatness of the human is so profound, and the impact of our actions, thoughts, and words are so tremendous that it's almost impossible that we don't mess up. And by the way, if you think I'm exaggerating, just read the words of the Machzor on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Just read the Al-Chetz, the Ashamnu, Maganu, Gazal. It's like it's. I once gave the mushal. Do you remember the bear in the crystal shop? It was Adam Rishon before the Chet was wearing a bear suit. After the sin, he became the bear. But if you put a bear in a crystal shop, the bear can try to be as careful as but he's going to break things. He can't help but do. In a sense, that's where we are at now, where it's almost impossible for us not to sin. It's almost impossible for us not to do things wrong. But again, the reason for that is because we were given such opportunity, and so much is dependent on us. And especially remember from weeks past, the upper worlds are dependent on what we do, and we create upper worlds. We cause them to light up or the opposite, but we're spaced out. And because we're spaced out, we don't realize the gravity of our actions. So it's almost impossible for us not to sin. And what that means in simple language is the first layer of punishment is in this world. That means pains and sorrow, etc. The next level of punishment is Gahannam. Now, I want you to understand something that's very, very misunderstood in the world. Is God mean? Is God vengeful? So why did he set us up in this terrible, terrible situation where we can't help but sin? It's not fair. We're going to burn in Gahannam. We're going to get punished in this world. And you tell me it's almost inevitable that we're going to do it. It's not fair. God, why are you so mean? Why are you so cruel? Right? Okay, so the first thing you have to understand is that any reward is 500 times the punishment. Meaning, the problem with the calculation is we don't realize the vast, incredible reward that we get for an action. What most people don't understand is and I'm in that group as well, because I wish I could really understand the gravity of our actions, the incredible impact. But the incredible impact means what I do with one mitzvah, what I do with one kind word, what I do with one chesed is life-changing. It literally changes the world. It literally lights up upper worlds. It creates a tremendous impact. Now, because I was put into this position of being a human being, and with that tremendous opportunities, you're right, it's inevitable that I'm also going to mess up, because this is plan B. I'm in the bear suit. I'm drunk. I'm not in the bear suit. I've become the bear. And in this state, it's inevitable that I'm going to mess up, and therefore I'm going to have to go through stuff. But the ultimate reward is so tremendous, so worth it, that in the scheme of things, it's a very good and wonderful situation. Okay, so far so good. So we have the tzaddik, the person who did mostly good, but did a lot of bad. First layer of punishment is in this world. That's usually not enough. Next layer of punishment is in the world to come. That's in Gahannam. Now, what is Gahannam? So again, it's the fiery embarrassment, the incredible sense of what was my problem, what was I thinking, what was my issue, and that sense of incredible busha is machaper and pays back some of the issues wrong. Okay, now the Russia, on the other hand, the Russia who did some things good, so he's given a good place in this world. He's given his reward in this world. He enjoys success in this world. He enjoys great things, and then when he's done, he's snuffed out. Now, not every Russia is snuffed out. Some spend some time in Gahannam, but the ultimate punishment is complete annihilation. Okay.
That's worse than Gehenna?
Worse than Gahannam.
Well, what about Titus and the whole thing with the...
Right. So I think the way it works is like this. There's the first layer of, let's say a Russia, a real Russia, wicked to the core. So he's done some good, so he's given his success in this world. Now, he may go to Gahannam for a while. I don't know why he would, to be honest with you. I don't know why he'd be going to Gahannam unless there's some cheshbon, because Gahannam really is a chesed. It's a purification. But it seems that they would spend some time in Gahannam. Then right in that third judgment, right before Tchias Mesim, that's when they're annihilated, snuffed out. They, like Elsie the cow, the nefesh just evaporates, which is the worst punishment. Why? Because it's only when you're drowning that you recognize how precious life is. And at that moment, when you see Hashem clearly, and you want to be in the mechitz of Hashem, and you want to be close, and you're told no, that is the worst. It's the worst possible punishment envisionable or imaginable. It doesn't get worse than that. Good.
Well, no, you didn't answer my question. You spoke in one of the Shmuzes, I don't remember the number,
Right.
about Titus and how
He's hanging out in Gahannam. Right, so he's annihilated right before Tchias Mesim. Again, there's...
so he suffers until Tchias Mesim.
Right, then Tchias Mesim, the third judgment, and then all who are worthy of being in Tchias Mesim are resurrected and come back into this world in a different form than now, and those who are not worthy are snuffed out.
What about like Tinok Shanishbar that never did? I mean, they didn't do bad, but they didn't do mitzvahs and stuff.
Okay, so we're going to get to that in a minute. Okay.
Yeah, but there's still just because you have knowledge of doing a mitzvah doesn't mean I know this mitzvah want to do it, but that doesn't mean that people that aren't Shomer Shabbos don't do plenty of mitzvahs and they don't,
But if they don't have intention to do the mitzvahs, it doesn't count as a mitzvah.
Right, and worse than that, in other words, meaning if you're not keeping the mitzvahs as a Jew, I mean, I guess maybe if you're really Tinuk Shenishba, see, Tinuk Shenishba would mean you're not held responsible, but at the end of the day, you're still not. But you
Didn't
can,
do anything.
right? Which we're going to get to in a minute, because so far what we've been dealing with is what I call the external system. The external system means outside of me. Let me give you a classic example. One of the best shmuzim I've ever said. I know it, and I'm very comfortable with it. I said it to 4 guys here in Muncie in a high school. Thursday night, I used to say a shmuz. We have how many people here? But there were 4 guys in the room, and no recording, nothing. I didn't let it record. 4 guys, and that was some of the best shmuzim I said were to 4 guys. Sometimes in Brooklyn, when we started out, certainly there were 14 guys. Okay, I once did the following cheshbon. At the time when I was saying my very popular shmuz in Brooklyn to about 14 guys, Rabbi Reisman was also saying a shir in Brooklyn, but he was saying it to 1,000 people. Now, I don't know how much more. I'd be hard pressed to believe that Rabbi Reisman prepared much more than I did. I doubt it. In fact, he probably prepared much less than I did. So, in terms of the internal work, the change in the person, I would be hard pressed to believe that he changed much more in that shir than I changed giving my shir. But the impact, the effect was vastly different. If you give a shir to 1,000 people and you impact 1,000 people, there are schusim, there are a tremendous ripple effect that comes back to you, and that's what I call the external system. The external system means nothing to do with you, but external, how you impact others, schusim, merits. I'll tell you a famous story that I love because it's Rabbi Rodin in Dallas, who's a Chavetz Chaim Talmud, and he's a good friend. A fellow once came over to him, and totally irreligious Jew, and wrote a $10,000 check. Now this was many years ago, and it was an incredibly large donation for someone who had no connection to the shul. So I wrote and said, "Tell me, I'm very happy to accept the donation, but what motivated you? What inspired you to make this donation?" He said, "I was in Israel. I was at the Western Wall, and there was a Jewish man there, a Hasid. He was praying. He had the payas, and he was so devout, and he was praying with such sincerity. I said, I want to support that, so I live here in Dallas, and I asked, where is the place closest to that? I found your shul is an Orthodox shul, so I wanted to donate to this cause." Okay, let's imagine L'Osid Lovo in the world to come, this Hasidic fellow, who a Yerushalmi Jew who probably doesn't speak a word of English, comes up to Shemayim, and they say, because of you, a $10,000 donation was made to the shul in Dallas, and because of that, 1,000 Jews learned, and people kept more Siddharim, and therefore all of those chusim are yours. The guy says, "What is Dallas? What is Texas? What's that?" For whatever the reason, he was the catalyst, he was the gorem, and the Chovos HaLevavos explained that if you are the catalyst of someone else doing good, it's credited to you. Now, the Chavetz Chaim explains that Hashem is fair, and he explains that if you're giving tzedakah, someone asks you for tzedakah, always give a little bit. You don't have to give a lot necessarily, but always give a little. And if you're worried that the person you're giving it to is not worthy, maybe don't worry about it, because Hashem will arrange it. You'll give to 9 not worthy people. The 10th one will be so worthy that you'll get the schusim of all of them having given it to worthy people. Meaning, Hashem works it out that if you're a worthy person, you get lucky. What does lucky mean? Lucky means you get the opportunity to do things and impact people in a big, big way. My wife is such a person. Have you met my wife? My wife doesn't know this. But I'm going to tell them the story of Mike.
Yeah.
Okay. So Mike, I was speaking in Rochester in NCSY, and after I was finished, it was a Friday night, and I was finished, this fellow comes over to me to ask a question. This fellow had more steps in his haircut and more earring holes in his ears than I could count, and he starts asking me questions, whatever, start talking. Anyway, we became friendly, and we started learning. We had a Seder, Mrs. Sharm, and we were learning regularly, and I don't know what, we learned for a good couple of months, and then somehow we parted ways, and we didn't learn for a while. And then one Shabbos, I'm walking into yeshiva, and there comes Mike the other way. And I say, "Mike, it's Shabbos." And he's wearing his jeans and his T-shirt, and And he says, "Oh, Rabbi, good Shabbos." I said, "How you doing, Mike? Good. What's doing?" He said, "Well, I just got a full scholarship to Indiana State University." I said, "That's great news, Mike," but he wasn't happy. And I said, "Why aren't you happy?" So anyway, I couldn't get it out of him. So I brought him home. I said, "Come to the house." So I brought him home, and I put him in front of my wife. And in 5 minutes, she found out the why. It would have taken me 2 hours. The why was because he wanted to go to yeshiva in Israel and learn, but his parents certainly were against it. And he just got this, this great scholarship. So that meant it was all over. Anyway, my wife said, "Well, forget the scholarship. Let's just go to Israel. Just do what you want. Don't worry about it." Bottom line is, Mike went to Israel. And Mike went to yeshiva. And Mike learned. And Mike learned some more. I was introduced to Mike's wife when I was... Michal, I was introduced to Mike's wife when he asked me. He said he's engaged and he brought his wife. And they're going to be in Philadelphia in the middle part. So anyway... Mike's parents were there, and Mike was there, and Mike's Kala. Now, Mike's Kala was a 9th generation Yerushalmi. She spoke not a word of English at the time. And Mike wore tefillin all day at that point, was learning Rav Zilberman's Kollel, and he's still doing that to this day. And I said to myself, 1 second, let's do the math. Let's say I hadn't been walking down the street that day. Let's say I didn't meet Mike. What would have happened to Mike? Mike would have gone to Indiana University and would have been, unfortunately, like the American Holocaust, would have been like, unfortunately, the rest of our 90% of our nation. But because that's not what happened, but because I met him and because my wife got a hold of him, and therefore he and his children and everything. So what that means in plain language is you do what you're supposed to, and Hashem arranges it for you to get lucky. What am I talking about? I was a high school Rebbe for 15 years, and many times I was very convinced that there were more productive things that I could be doing. More productive things like digging ditches, or maybe sweeping the street, because well, that you're doing that's sheer. That's what sheer is. So, but if you do what you're supposed to and you put in your effort, it's Hashem arranges it. You get lucky, and I think at that point I've been teaching for 10 years. I think my one schus I got lucky. I got a mic. What the Chavos of Avos explains to us is that there are two systems in the world to come, the internal and the external. The internal is how much I work on me, how much I grow, how much I accomplish, how much of a Bal Midos I become, how much I work in Amunah. That's internal. The external system is the impact that I have on others. How much do I influence others? How much do I impact others? How much of an effect I have? Both systems are vital, and both systems work in the world to come. And both systems determine who we are for eternity. The key distinction between the external system and the internal system is that the external system, it directly depends on the impact that you have. The internal system is directly dependent on effort and not results, but how much effort you put in. So in any case, what we've been talking about till now is the external system. So again, a person gave $1 million to tzedakah, and he got lucky, and he built the yeshiva, and yeshiva flourished, and became very successful. He gets a tremendous amount of schusim. Let's say a person got unlucky, and he gave $1 million to a Torah project, and it went bankrupt, whatever, and nothing came of it. He gets much, much less schusim. And therefore, ladies, as a piece of advice, be very, very wise and very prudent in the way you invest your ma'aser money. We all have limited resources, and if you have a certain amount of money that you're able to use for tzedakah, you have to be very judicious and very, very carefully calibrate where you spend your ma'aser money. You're looking to get as much bang for your buck. Now, 50% of it at least should go to real tzedakah. Real tzedakah means aniyim, poor people. The closer to you, the better. Meaning, aniyei ircha kodmim, your family first, and then outwards, etc. But another 50% can be used, and probably should be used, for different projects. Projects mean anything from a hospital to yeshiva to a chesed project to kiruv but you have to.
You can't give 100% of it to the family member if they're very needy?
If they need it, you could. If they need it and they can't, yes, you could. Then you could. Yes, you could. But if that's the situation, then yes. But if it's not the situation, again, it's the pecking order in terms of the money that you give to poor people is first your family, then your community, then your city, then your country, etc., wider and wider. So, assuming you don't have immediate needs and no one's, your immediate family or nobody's really, banging on your door, so then the other 50% you could use for other type of Torah projects or kiruv or whatever you feel, Chinese auctions, to worthy organizations. Yeah, but see, the point is, if you get the glossy, glittery catalog for the Chinese auction, and the organization is not doing much good work, it's a poor investment of your Maisa money, because whatever you accomplish, meaning if you donate money and that organization does good work, that's your schusim. If you donate money to Save the Whales, then okay, you save some whales, but it ain't going to get you very far in the world to come. So you have to be very wise and very very judicious in the way you invest your Meiser money, because again, it's a big part of your schusim, a big part of who you are. And again, keep in mind, if you do what you're supposed to do and you trust Hashem, Hashem will guide you properly. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to be overly, people sometimes get paranoid. You have to do your best, and Hashem will arrange it. You'll get lucky. You'll get the right people, the right situation, etc. But bottom line is, that's an external system. Now, by the way, external system are also things like Kaddish, right? We say Kaddish for a departed person. Why do we do that? It's an Ilui Neshama. If you learn Mishnayos, it elevates the Neshama of the Nifta. If you learn, if you give tzedakah, it elevates the Neshama. Now, I want to ask you a question. That person didn't change. The person's dead, right? Let's say your father dies, and you learn Shas, and you learn Shas Be'in, and you give $1 million to tzedakah. Your father didn't change. He's still the same. The answer is, in the external system, those merits are considered. There's a concept, Bra Mezaka Aviv, that the son children are direct representatives of the parents, because the parent is the cause of the child to be in the world. So there's a direct connection. So anything the child does is directly credited to the parents. So therefore, we do things. We say Kaddish, we learn, we do. Why? Because what that does is it elevates the neshama. It's the external system. It gives them additional schusim, etc. And that's all in the external system. Now, the internal system is vastly different. The internal system is 100% me. How much I fight, how much I battle, how much I win the fights, and how much I lose the fights. And it cuts across the full gamut, all of the midos and all of the chesed and emunah and bitachon, and it cuts across the full gamut. Now, the key distinction between the internal and the external, again, is that the external is based on results. The internal is based on effort. But here's the real sort of kicker to this whole cheshbon. I want you to imagine the following. Imagine a fellow, he's 22 years of age, he gets drunk, and he drives a car at 80 miles an hour. The police call him over. The police pull him over, and he's drunk, stone drunk. They put him into jail. His father hires the best lawyer he can find, and the lawyer argues a very, very good case. Your Honor, it's a first-time offender. He's an upstanding member of the community, and he's a student, and he's never done it before. He will never do it again. If the lawyer presents a very good case, it could well be that the judge will dismiss the case and send the fellow home. Okay, good. But what if the same case happens? The 22-year-old fellow gets drunk, drives a car, and wraps that car around a telephone pole and is paralyzed from the neck down. At that point, the judge may say, I waive the charges against him, but the fellow's still paralyzed. He's not walking because he got into that car accident. The key distinction between the external system and the internal system is that, let's go back to our Tinuk Shenishba, who never did much in his life. So we have a fellow, a fine fellow. He was brought up in Wyoming, and he never had much exposure to Jews. And the best he had was Manischewitz matzah once, because his great-grandmother said you should eat it on Passover, and he left this world without doing much at all. Okay, so you'll tell me he's Tinuk Shenishba. Okay, you're right. There's no accountability against him, no cheshbon against him, maybe, but still, what has he accomplished? What has he done? What you see, every mitzvah shapes me, molds me. So, could he do some chesed? Maybe if he did it lishma, he has something. But you know what I'm saying. But the internal isn't shaped, isn't formed. So
let's say that person's son becomes Baal Tshuva.
that may elevate them tremendously. It will elevate them tremendously. How much an effect is way above my pay scale, I don't know, but it definitely has a tremendous impact. And the best favor you could do your parents is to do what you're supposed to do. And the worst curse to your parents is when you don't do what you're supposed to do. But that, it definitely has a very real impact. Again, exactly how much is way above my pay scale. But it definitely has a very real impact. And again, it's one of the advantages of being a Baal Tshuva. The greatest present you could give your parents is to do what you're supposed to do, because when you do that and everything that comes out of you is a credit to them, right? It's an automatic credit. So it's good to be good and not good not to be good.
Why is it a credit to them? What did they do?
So they're responsible for you being here.
They didn't kill you when you were a teenager.
That's
Right.
good. that as well. That as well.
I think in some ways, not everybody, but I feel like with my father, he wasn't from, but he was very like the emes was everything to him, and I think that pulled me towards Yiddishkeit. Like my search for the emes is what.
Now then it's much more direct even. In other words, not only is he responsible for you being here, but
He
led right.
Directly.
And
But he didn't really lead me because
But he did because he led you on a path
He
of truth.
educated you in a certain way.
He brought you up.
Instilled those morals in you.
Right, he instilled in you a love, an appreciation of truth, and that's what led you, and therefore,
How do you like them apples?
yeah, how do you like them apples? Right. So in that sense, by the way, anyone who's watching on the Zoom, please feel free. You could write questions in. I don't want you to think that we're ignoring you. Please feel free to write them in. Not just people who are here can ask. But again, the key point that the internal system is I would say, I don't want to use the word irreparable, but it almost is. In other words, it's much more difficult to repair it. Certainly to make up for that what you didn't do is almost impossible. In other words, the internal system is the same judgment as we had on the external, meaning the external system, so we had a person who was mostly good and did some bad. So he was punished in this world, and then the second level of punishment was Gahannam. The same thing happens vis-a-vis the internal system, meaning you go through various life situations and sorrows and trouble and pain, as we discussed last week, it has a sobering impact, it has a softening impact, it makes you introspective, it changes you as an individual. A lot of times that's not sufficient, and you need Gahannam, and Gahannam does part B. But again, that's all in the external. But the same thing that in the external happens in the internal. Same thing you get through this world and then Gahannam. Okay.
You said there are people that stay in Gahannam until Prius meets him. I was on the impression that Gahannam was like 11 months or 12 months.
Yeah. So for Yisrael, it's 11 months. For Poshe Yisrael, people like really, really wicked Yisrael, it's 12 months. And after that, the assumption is no Yisrael is there after 12 months. There are apparently exceptions, because there are various Gemaras that discuss people who are still in Gahannam today, many thousands of years after they left this earth. And that, I assume, is again a punishment, it's not a cleansing, more of a retribution for what they've done wrong, because there wasn't enough in this world to pay them back, so they had to go through that.
What about Acher? Wasn't he like years and years?
130 years in Gahannam. 130 years. That's a while. That's a long stay. That can make some toast. Yeah. But in the end, he was allowed into Gan Eden, a splintered down version of what he would have been, but nevertheless in Gan Eden. Okay.
But the internal and external, the punishment system is also based on the external system.
Well, both. Punishment system is both.
Internal and external. So now it's the same way that if anything I've done has encouraged or influenced other people to do good, then I'm going to get slusim for that. But if
Yep.
Chas v'shalom somebody exhibits some behavior that would lead other people to
Right.
be not good, they're being punished for that also.
I remember very clearly, I had a friend of mine, I went to MTA, and I think it was when we were supposed to be seniors or 11th grade, I forgot what, I had a friend of mine who said to me, you know, everyone needs a Yetzer Hara. I'm going to be your Yetzer Hara. And he decided he wanted to make me drive on Shabbos. Now, he didn't succeed, but it was a real, he was going to be my Yetzer Hara. Like that. So you could really mess yourself up, because if you take someone down, you know.
Did he drive on Shabbos?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we were out of school already at that point. We were out of MTA, but yeah. But that was a line. He meant it in all seriousness. Everyone needs a Yetzer Hara. I'll be your Yetzer Hara. And his intention was to, you know, so you definitely have this, you know. It's a wise person. If you they tell, I used to say this to guys in yeshiva all the time, if you're going to mess up, do it privately. Don't drag other people down with you, because you mess up, okay, you're responsible for you. Eventually you'll clean yourself up, hopefully you'll pull out of it. But if you drag other people down with you, all bets are off. Who knows if they'll come back? Who knows what? Don't do it alone. There's some things you're better off doing solo. Don't fly with co-pilots on some missions. But the point is, though, that you're right. The external as well as the internal are punished, paid back in this world and the world to come. Okay. Now there's one more step that's a little frightening. Here we go. What happens if a person did a lot of good? Did a lot of good, but they also did bad, and Hashem feels that that person really is not worthy of being amongst the tzaddikim in the world to come. So Derech Hashem explains that that person might be paid back a big part of his olam haba in this world. So, for instance, you might have a person who's really, really an accomplished Jew. He learns, he davens. A woman is a tremendous balas chesed, and they might be a picture perfect, at least to our eye, like they belong in the front row in Gan Eden. But there are various things that they did that were really wrong, inappropriate, etc. Hashem may well pay them back much of their schusim in this world. They'll make a lot of money, they'll have great success, whatever it may be. And in the world to come, instead of being in the front row, they're in the back row, because they were paid back much of their schusim in the world to come. I often tell people, don't daven for ashirus, because not only is ashirus a very dangerous nisayon, you don't always know why you're getting it. And in fact,
That's not to say that people that are successful, it means that they're losing part of their own haba.
no, the Chofetz Chaim says you can tell. He says you can tell what they're given. He says great wealth is either a bracha, a nisayon, or a klala. And you can tell how the person acts, what it is. If it's a bracha, a person becomes very wealthy, and they become much more involved in learning and davening and community work, and they become a much more pious, holy Jew. You're looking at a Jew who got a bracha. Hashem gave him a bracha because Hashem knew that this person would focus more on avodas Hashem, would grow much more, and that's a bracha. If you see a person who gets great wealth and he becomes torrid, very busy, his business and his investments, and he's constantly, you're looking at a person who's living in an assignment. Hashem gave him that wealth as a test. How is he going to use the money? How involved in money is he going to become? How hoardy is he going to become, etc. But then there's a third level. If a person becomes entrenched into materialism, he buys the boat and the yacht, the 3 houses, the villas, and he gets really into it, then you're looking at a person who is using up his olam haba in this world. Now, those are extremes, but there are many, many levels in between. And again, it's not something to be, not worth davening for, because again, it's not so simple. That, again, why you're getting it and how to use it. And, again, if you get it and use it properly, it's a sign that it's a bracha. If you get it and you're busy with it, it's a sign that it's an assignment. And if you get it and you get into the material world, then it's a sign that it's a klala. Okay, so let's recap. So again, there are if a person is a total tzaddik, he goes olam haba. Total person Russia destroyed. The problem is everybody else in between who have a lot of good and some bad, or a lot of bad and some good. So the first level of payment is in this world. So if you have a person that did a lot of good and has some bad, they'll be punished in this world. They'll get the mishpat, the judgment in this world. They'll suffer through stuff. And by the way, when you see very good people going through really hard times, people's why Hashem, why? I don't know. I never had that kasha. It's a huge chesed Hashem. If you get it in this world, it's gone and it's free, and then for eternity you have great, you have olam haba. So again, the first payment is in this world. If you did mostly good and you did some bad, you paid back in this world with pain, suffering, etc. If you did a lot of good, if you did a lot of bad and some good, then you paid back in this world with riches and success, etc. And you're toast in the world to come. But often that's not enough. So next level is Gahannam. If you did a lot of good in this world, but some bad, and it wasn't enough pain in this world to cleanse you, so Gahannam is level 2. It cleanses you out. And then you're able to enjoy for eternity. Again, there are 3 times of judgment. The first judgment is every Rosh Hashanah will judge for this world. The second time of judgment is when a person dies, you're judged basically where your level is. Unfortunately, most of us are going to spend some time in Gahannam, which again is a purification. Then the final judgment is before Tchias Mesim, where it's determined who will live for eternity and who won't. The internal system, the external system again is based on how much you impact others, etc. Internal system is how much you work on your own midos and etc. And again, the big point of the internal system is that you can't make up for that which you didn't do. In other words, meaning you could give lots of money to tzedakah, you could build yeshivas, but if you didn't grow internally, then you're lacking. So you really have to work both systems, and then in Mitzvah Hashem you get to the point where you're the great tzaddik and you get what you're supposed to get. Mitzvah Hashem. Okay.
That's for Mike.
Oh, right, that on the wall. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's for Mike. Mike is now, he's married off kids already now at this point.
He looks like,
When he was in Philadelphia, he was wearing tefillin all day?
When he came back, he wasn't in Philly. He just came, his parents
lived there.
His parents lived there, so he came back.
But outside of the yeshiva, did he wear tefillin all day?
Yeah. I mean, he lives in the old city. Well, actually now in the Arab Quarter, not even the old city anymore, now the Arab Quarter. And again, he wears tefillin all day, and he's learned that he is the real deal.
He's a brilliant kid.
Yeah, he's also right. He's not a kid anymore.
When he was.
Well, he was.
When
yeah.
we met him, he was 18.
Yeah. When we met him, he was a very brilliant kid. Yeah. By the way, someone has a question. I started Derech Hashem late. Where can I find the shir that I missed? So they're where can you find the shir that I missed? So they're on the Shmuz.com. Where are they? We put them up on Vimeo. I think they're on the Shmuz. Send me an email. I don't know where they are. Where are they?
It might be on podcast, but I'm not.
Oh, they're definitely on the podcast. Yes. If you're interested, we have the Shmuz podcast 3-4 times a week. We update the Shmuz podcast. Wherever you get your podcast for Spotify or Apple Play, wherever you get your podcast from, just type in THESHMUZ and you can get all of the Derech Hashem shir are there, the Shmuz Live is there, the quite a number of series, etc. there. But they're also on Vimeo, and I believe they should be on the Shmuz.com as well. And again, if you have not gotten the 10 really dumb mistakes that very smart couples make, that is the 10th really dumb mistake, not getting that book. Right? And tomorrow, it's Hashem, from 1 to 6, you can come and get free cholent and get a signed copy of the book in Wasserman's in Kew Garden Hills. I'm going to be there tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, from 1 till 6, eating cholent and signing books. So if you'd like to join me, you can. Cholent is good. Anyone in Kew Garden Hills, you're more than welcome to come. That's right. Ready to see when the Seder ends. Right. All right.
When you disconnect, I have a question.
Okay, good. Okay, was there any questions? Okay, actually, let me do one question. When we see someone suffering terribly, this person is mamish a pure giving and warm person, why is this person suffering such a surim? From a previous Gilgal, perhaps, how can we judge by the yardstick you've outlined? So, all right. So first of all, let's be very clear. It's not our job to judge, and I can't know. I can never know where someone else is holding, and it's not my job to judge. But when we're dealing with perspective and trying to get an outlook and trying to understand things, I think it's not that hard to understand. Why? Because a person could be very accomplished and can be a tremendous person and very giving, but we all mess up. We all do things wrong. And to be imperfect, you can't be imperfect next to Hashem. There's no room for imperfection there. So if you're there, you have to be perfect. So you got to either get perfected here or perfected in Gahannam, but imperfect doesn't exist there. So if you're imperfect, then you're not going to be there. So the greatest chesed is to either suffer the pain here, which is quick, and even though, yes, it seems very long, but it really is quick, or in Gahannam, or some other point, because without being perfect, we don't belong there, we can't be there. So that's really the greatest chesed that Hashem will actually allow people. Oh, I see people are here. People are on the Zoom who are living in Muncie. Okay. Busted, exactly. You've been seen. All right. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week, Yimitz Hashem.
When you saw there are definitely I'm drawing a blank of who, but you always hear this Russia was a Google, that Russia, or whatever it is, but so are you saying by that Hashem kept those neshamas around, not like they became toast and they went away, to be able to be the next Russia for that generation? Or is that one neshama that just basically just keeps coming back? I
mean, so first of all, most of we discussed this previously. Most of us probably are Gegulim. We missed that shir. Derech Hashem speaks about Gegulim at length, and we spent the shir, I think 2 shirs ago, discussing Gilgulim. And most likely, most of us have been here before. Now, usually, Russia. Don't forget, Hashem uses. Let's talk about Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was a pawn. Was a prop that Hashem used to accomplish a certain mission, guided and directed by Hashem. So, who was it that Hashem put into? I don't know who. Maybe it was a Russian from a previous generation. Hashem gave him a chance to totally annihilate himself. I don't know. That's way above my pay scale, but it could be.
Is it off?
It is off.
Okay.
Let me shut this one off. Also, this is also records. I'm saying I don't want to catch it by mistake.